Sometimes when I'm sitting here by the window with the sun falling just right on my lap, I catch a whiff of cinnamon and warm apples from the bakery down the street, and Lord have mercy, it takes me right back. Just like that. Back to my old kitchen in the village, back to before the sky ever knew what war looked like. Funny, isn't it? How a simple smell, just a pie bikini, can open up a whole world of memories you thought you tucked away for good. Now don't get me wrong, I do love it here in Chicago. My grandbabies call me every evening, and there's always someone fussing over me, making sure I've eaten or taken my medicine. I sit in my little room with my crochet basket and my photo albums, and for the most part, I'm at peace. But then comes the apple pie, or a song on the radio in Ukrainian, or the sound of boots on gravel, and I feel that ache again, deep in my chest, like a door swinging open I never meant to unlock. I'll tell you what, I've kept this story close to my heart for a long time. Not 'cause I was ashamed or anything like that, no, but because some things, well, they just hurt too much to say out loud. And back then, we didn't talk about the pain. We just carried it, like laundry in a basket, quiet, heavy. That was just the way things were. But lately, I've been thinking, maybe it's time to tell it before the Lord calls me home and it disappears with me. See, it all started on a quiet evening in February 2022. I remember it clear as day. I was in my little house just outside Kharkiv, cold wind outside, kettle whistling on the stove, and I had just pulled an apple pie out of the oven, made with what I could find at the market that day. My hands were still covered in flour when the first explosion hit, shook the windows like the breath of God. I dropped the pie, glass dish shattered on the floor, and for a second I didn't move. I just stood there, holding a wooden spoon, looking out at the gray sky that had suddenly turned to smoke. That night changed everything. And I didn't know it yet, but it was the last time I'd ever stand in my own kitchen. The last time I'd bake in my old oven. The last time I'd fall asleep in my bed with my little dog at my feet and the sound of the church bells carrying across the field. You young folks wouldn't understand, not fully anyway. But when you've lived somewhere your whole life, when every tree, every crack in the wall holds a memory, leaving it, well, it's like ripping out your roots with your own hands. I didn't leave because I wanted to. I left because I had to. And that's what I want to share with you today. Not just the pain of it, no, but the strength it took. The way we made do with what we had. The little kindnesses. The strangers who became family. The heartbreak, yes, but also the hope. 'Cause if there's one thing this old heart knows, it's that you can lose a lot. But if you still got love, you still got everything. So go ahead, sit with me a while. I'll pour us some tea. And I'll tell you the story I've been carrying one little piece at a time. And maybe, just maybe, you'll see a part of your own heart in it too. Well now, if I close my eyes real tight and sit real still, I can still hear the hens clucking out by the coop and the sound of mama beating dough in the big yellow bowl on the table. That's where I'll start, not with the war now, but with the warm, butter-scented mornings of my childhood, back in our little village outside of Kharkiv. Lord, that was a world so different from today, you young folks wouldn't believe it even if I showed you pictures. I was born in 1958, a summer baby. Life back then, it moved slower. We didn't have much, not even a pot to pee in some days, but we had enough. Enough love, enough bread, enough sunshine. I was the youngest of 3, and Mama always said I was her shadow, following her around with wide eyes and bare feet, asking questions and getting in the way. My papa, may he rest in peace, was a quiet man with vague, weathered hands and a laugh like rolling thunder. He worked the land, just like his father did, and he believed in 2 things, hard work and God's timing. We lived in a small house with a red tin roof that pinged when it rained. There were wildflowers growing by the fence, and every spring, the whole yard smelled like lilac and fresh earth. I used to help Mama hang sheets on the line, and she'd tell me stories about the stars and the saints while the wind danced between us. On Sundays, we'd walk down to the church, all dressed up, hair in ribbons, shoes polished even if they were too tight. And after service, we'd gather with neighbors for tea, sunflower seeds, and stories that never seemed to end. I wasn't thinking about war back then. I wasn't even thinking about America or leaving my village. I was just thinking about how the sky looked in October and whether that boy Ivan would pass me a note during Harvest Festival. I had dreams, sure, simple ones. I wanted to be a teacher, maybe, or open a little bakery. I used to draw cakes in the margins of my school books, all tall and decorated like the ones I saw in the city shop windows. But most of all, I dreamed of a big family. A house full of Logan children, a man who'd love me steady, and never have to go off to fight nothing. Back then, I believed with my whole heart that if you were kind to people, they'd be kind back. That the world was mostly good. That people always came home. I didn't know how fragile life could be, how it could turn overnight like milk surin in the summer heat. I thought home would always be there, waiting, that the fields would always bloom, that Mama's lullabies would never fall silent. I didn't know, not yet, that even the strongest roots can be torn from the ground, that someday I'd leave those dusty roads and end up half a world away, wondering if my village still stood. But I carry it all with me, every smell, every face, every barefoot summer. It's stitched into my soul like embroidery on a Sunday blouse. So when people ask me now, Anna, what was it like where you grew up? I just smile a little and say it was soft. It was simple. It was mine. Because even when the world crumbles around you, what you carry in your heart, that's the real home. That's what keeps you warm when nothing else will. Now, I don't believe in coincidences. Not really. I think the Lord puts people in our path when we need them most, even if we don't know it at the time. And when I look back, I see it clear as day. He didn't ride in on a white horse or sweep me off my feet like in the magazines. No. He came into my life on a Tuesday afternoon with muddy boots, a crooked smile, and a book tucked under his arm. His name was Mikola. He was from the next village over. His family moved near ours after the harvest fires burned down half their old home. He was quiet, older than me by a few years, and always reading something. Not just school books, but real literature, poetry, philosophy, even some dusty American novels he found in a crate behind the old schoolhouse. We first met in the village square, right outside the bread shop. I was carrying eggs in my apron, trying not to trip over my own feet, and he was sitting on the bench with his nose buried in a book. He looked up just as I passed, and said, in that low, thoughtful voice of his, "You dropped an egg." I hadn't, of course. He was just being cheeky, but I blushed so deep I thought I might burst into flames. I remember, Logan, that real kind of laugh, the one that bubbles up from your belly before your mind even catches up. I couldn't explain it then, why my heart jumped a little, why my palms got clammy. I didn't even know his name yet, but something shifted, like a breeze had passed right through my chest. After that, I saw him everywhere. At the well, in the market, near the chapel steps. Always with a book, always with that same calm look in his eyes. He wasn't loud or boastful like the other boys. He didn't whistle or tease. He just noticed things. He noticed me. Once, he handed me a copy of Les Miserables and said, "You strike me as someone who sees more than she says." I didn't know what to make of it, but I took the book. Read it cover to cover. Twice. He started walking me home after choir practice. We'd talk about everything. The stars, the price of sugar, whether God had favorites. And one day, Just as the sun was setting behind the barn and throwing gold all over the fields, he stopped and said, "I don't want to go through this life without knowing what your laugh sounds like every day." I was 17, just a girl, really. But in that moment, I felt grown. I felt seen. Now, don't go thinking this turned into some fairy tale. Life wasn't kind like that. But Mikola, he was the first person who made me believe I was more than just a farmer's daughter. He saw something in me before I even saw it myself. That's why I remember him so sharp. That's why, even now, all these years later, sometimes when I hear the crinkle of old paper or the low hum of a man's voice in prayer, I think of him. I didn't know it then, but meeting Mikola would set off a whole line of events. He stirred something in me, not just love, but hunger. For more. For truth. For a life of my own choosing. And I'll be honest, not everything that followed was beautiful. But he was. And so is that season. Life has a way of pulling the rug out from under you when you least expect it. One minute you're walking barefoot through the sunflowers, and the next, you're faced with choices you never imagined. Feeling things you can't even name. That's how it was when my whole world began to shift the moment things got hard. It started with a letter. A letter that didn't have any business being delivered to me. It came one cold autumn day when the air was thick with fog, the kind that makes the world feel small and distant. The letter was from Mikola. He had been conscripted into the army. And just like that, he was gone. No goodbyes. No promises. Just a slip of paper, crumpled and cold in my hands. I'll tell you what, I didn't know how to feel. I didn't know if I was angry or scared or sad. A mix of everything, maybe. He didn't want to go, of course. No one ever wants to leave their home and go to war. But he had no choice, you see. He had to serve, just like every other young man in those days. That was how things worked back then. The war came to you even when you hadn't asked for it. And for me, it was like someone had ripped out a piece of my heart and left a hole that didn't fill right. I couldn't make sense of it. The mornings were cold after that. The sun never seemed as warm. I didn't know what to do with myself. My family, they didn't understand. They said, "Don't go getting attached. He's just a boy. You're too young for these feelings." And that hurt more than I could say. I wanted to scream at them, to tell them that I knew what I felt. But I didn't have the words. All I had was the knot in my stomach, the way my hands shook when I thought of him. It wasn't just Mikola leaving that set everything in motion, though. It was the way the world around me started to change, too. The war wasn't far anymore. It was on our doorstep, creeping closer each day. The village started to feel different. More hollow, more tense. People's eyes darted around like they were waiting for something to explode. People weren't laughing much anymore. The festivals stopped. No one would talk about it, but we all knew. I was just a girl then, but I saw it. I saw how everything shifted. My mama tried to keep us busy, planting, baking, doing everything we could to forget. But my heart wasn't in it. It was scattered. Torn between the need to be strong for my family and the desire to run after Mikola. I'd dream of him at night, walking through the dark, trying to find him in a world that kept changing. But when I woke up, all I had was silence. Then came the day that changed everything. It wasn't just the war knocking at the door, it was a decision I had to make. Mikola wrote to me, just a few lines, saying he was safe, but could be called to the front at any time. He wanted me to wait for him. And I wanted to, I did. But what about my family? What about my future? My mama had made it clear, you can't wait for a man who's at war, Anna. She said it like it was an easy decision, like I had some other choice. But my heart, it wasn't listening. And that's where the dilemma came in. Do I follow my heart, stay true to the love I felt, the life I wanted with him, Or do I listen to the voice of reason, the voice of society, my family, the people who would shake their heads and call me foolish? I didn't have an answer, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I didn't want to be a girl left behind, waiting for something that might never come. But I also didn't want to forget what love felt like, even for a moment. It was as though the world was pressuring me from every side, pushing me to make a choice I wasn't ready to make. And when Nicola's letters stopped coming, when we heard rumors of things that made my skin crawl, I knew the decision had already been made for me. I remember the moment everything changed, not just in the world around me, but inside me, too. I remember because it was so quiet right before. The kind of quiet that makes your ears ring. I was standing in the kitchen, peeling potatoes by the window, and I looked out to see the horizon glowing not with sunset, but with fire. I remember how the clock on the wall stopped ticking, just stopped. And in that frozen second, I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. It was March of 2022. I was already older then, gray at the temples, hands slower than they used to be. Nicola was long gone. I never did find out what happened to him. Some say he died on the front. Others say he disappeared into the smoke of history, like so many others. But life had gone on. I'd raised my daughter, buried my husband, and tried to find peace in the rhythm of small things, kneading bread, hanging laundry, listening to the radio in the evenings. But that night, it tore through all of that like a storm through lace. The war had come to our village. It started with the sound of planes, a low and angry, like thunder with teeth. Then came the shaking, windows rattling, plates falling from shelves. I ran to the cellar, clutching my mother's old Bible to my chest like it could stop the sky from falling. I could hear screams in the distance, explosions, then silence, and then the crying, not just outside, but inside me. The kind of crying that doesn't make it to your throat. It just sits deep in your chest and pulls you down like a stone. That night, I lost my home, the house I was born in, the roof my papa fixed every summer, the walls that held my daughter's first steps, all gone in a flash of light and fire. 1 second it was there. The next, a blackened pile of memory and smoke. I didn't even get to say goodbye to the table where I first kissed Nicola's hand. I didn't get to grab the photograph of my mama on her wedding day. It was all just gone. But that wasn't the worst of it. I remember standing there in the dirt, ash on my face, hands trembling at my sides, and looking up to see a little girl, no more than 5, clutching a teddy bear with one eye missing. Her mama lay motionless beside her. And I swear to you, in that moment, something inside me cracked wide open. All the sorrow, the fear, the helplessness I had tried to bury for years came flooding out. And I felt useless, like I had survived all these years only to stand there and watch the world collapse all over again. That night, I became someone else. I don't know if it was strength or survival or just pure will, but something changed in me. I took that child by the hand. I didn't know where we were going or what we'd find, but I knew I couldn't stand there a moment longer. I had already lost everything that tied me to that place, except my heart, and it's still hard work to do. I realized then that survival isn't just about staying alive. It's about deciding what to carry forward and what to let burn. After the fire, after the screams faded and the smoke cleared, there was only silence. Not the peaceful kind, no. This was the kind of silence that presses in on your ears, settles in your bones. The kind that comes after something sacred has been broken, and the world doesn't know how to breathe anymore. That's what those days were like, the days that didn't have names. Just one stretch of gray after another. I wandered for a time, not just with my feet, but with my heart. I don't even remember where I went first. Somewhere west, I think. I followed the flow of others, mostly women and children, all carrying plastic bags with their whole lives inside. People walked without speaking. Some cried without making a sound. I didn't cry, not then. I was too tired, too hollow. It's strange, you'd think losing your home, your history, your everything would feel like grief. But what I felt was more like floating, like I'd been untied from the earth. I ended up at a camp near the Polish border. They gave me soup, thick and hot, and Lord, when that warmth hit my lips, the tears finally came. Not sobbing, not wailing, just quiet tears running down my cheeks, into my collar. I remember thanking the young volunteer who gave me that bowl like she had handed me salvation. She couldn't have been more than 20. She put her hand on mine and said, "You're safe now." And I believed her, just for a moment. But being safe, that's not the same as feeling whole. I was alive, yes. But the Anna who had danced in the fields, who'd kissed Mikola behind the church, who'd sang lullabies to her baby girl, she was gone. I felt like a ghost in my own skin. My hands still worked, my legs carried me from cot to cot, but I didn't recognize myself. I didn't trust my voice. I didn't know what to believe anymore. Faith? Well, it wavered. I won't lie to you. I sat with my Bible, but the words felt like someone else's story. I watched people pray with such fire in their hearts, and I envied them. I wanted to believe that there was purpose in all this pain, that we weren't just scattered ashes in the wind. But for a while, I didn't. I couldn't. And that was the hardest part. I think not the loss of the house or the land, but the loss of who I was when I still believed the world was good. No one really talks about that part. The part after. The quiet days. When your hands stop shaking, but your soul still aches. When you look in the mirror and see someone older, heavier, colder. I didn't smile much then. I didn't speak unless I had to. I just survived, one foot in front of the other, one meal at a time. But somewhere in that silence, in that long stretch of emptiness, I began to notice things again. The way the snow fell soft on the window ledge, the way a child's laugh cut through the stillness like a song. It wasn't much, but it was something. A flicker. Not hope, not yet, but the shape of it. Like a candle across a dark room, barely glowing, but there. And I realized I was still here. That had to count for something. There's something about helping someone else that starts to stitch a person back together, piece by piece. I didn't plan on it. Lord knows I wasn't looking for redemption or a fresh start. I didn't even believe in such things anymore. That one day, about 3 weeks after I crossed into Poland, I was sitting outside the shelter with a shawl over my knees and a heaviness in my chest that wouldn't budge. The snow had melted just enough to leave puddles of gray slush, and the air had that wet metal smell that always reminded me of early spring back home. A little girl came up to me, tiny thing, maybe 6, with one missing mitten and a runny nose. She had these big brown eyes, wide with worry, and she stood there looking at me like I was supposed to fix something. At first I thought maybe she was lost. But then she reached out her hand and held up a tangled knot of yarn, red yarn. Looked like it used to be a scarf, maybe, or a doll sweater. She didn't say a word, just held it out to me, trusting that I might know what to do. And I'll tell you what, I stared at that mess of threads and felt something stir in my hands. A memory, a rhythm. I used to knit all the time, back when my eyes were sharper and my fingers steadier. I made socks for the whole family every Christmas. Blankets, too. And now here I was, a broken old woman with nothing but time on her hands, and this little soul staring up at me like I still had some magic left. So I nodded. I took the yarn, found a basket of donated supplies in the next room, and sat down by the fire that night with an old pair of needles someone had left behind. My fingers were stiff at first, clumsy. I dropped more stitches than I cared to admit. But before long, the rhythm came back. Knit, purl, breathe. Knit, purl, remember. And as the scarf began to grow, row by row, so did something in me, like a root pressing back into soil. The little girl came back, every day to check on my progress. She never said much, just sat beside me, swinging her legs and humming a song I didn't recognize. I found out later her name was Sophia, and she'd lost both parents in the bombing. She was staying with an aunt who barely spoke. That scarf, that silly little thing, was all she had left from her mama. I gave it back to her 3 days later, mended, not perfect, but strong. She wrapped it around her neck like it was made of gold, and before she ran off, she threw her arms around me so tight I thought my heart might burst right there in my chest. That's when I knew. I wasn't done yet. Maybe I couldn't change the world. Maybe I couldn't go back and stop the war or bring back my home or the people I'd loved. But I could still be useful. I could still bring warmth to someone's cold hands. I could still show up every day and offer what little I had left, even if it was just a needle and a ball of yarn. And let me tell you something, that knowledge, that tiny shift, it saved me, gave me a reason to rise in the morning, gave me a thread to follow out of the dark. It sat there for days, that old brown suitcase leaning against the wall in my corner of the shelter, half-sipped, silent, waiting. It had made the whole journey with me, across fields, over borders, through train stations and muddy roads, carried by strangers, dropped in snow, stuffed under bunks. It held everything I still had left. A photo of my daughter when she was little, a cracked comb, Mama's handkerchief, a pair of wool socks I couldn't bring myself to wear. It wasn't just a suitcase. It was the last piece of the life I used to have. And I couldn't touch it. You see, my daughter had been trying to get me to come to America for years. Long before the war. Mama, she'd say, come stay with us, we have room, you'll love Chicago. The kids would be so happy to have you close. But I always said no. That's not my home, I'd tell her. My bones belong in Ukraine. I meant it too. Back then, I thought leaving would mean forgetting. That if I stepped too far from the soil I was born on, everything I loved would disappear for good. But the war, it burned that soil right out from under me. And suddenly I had nowhere to return to, only forward to go. Still, when the papers came through, and the flight was booked, and my daughter's voice shook with joy over the phone, I just sat there staring at that suitcase like it was some kind of curse. As if picking it up would mean I was finally given in letting go of the last thread holding me to the past. But here's the truth I hadn't dared to say out loud, not to her, not to the others, not even to myself. I wasn't afraid of America. I wasn't even afraid of starting over. I was afraid that if I let myself live again, I'd be betraying the ones who didn't get that chance. The house that burned. The neighbors I buried in my heart. Mikola, Mama, my husband, my home. It took a long night of no sleep, a sky full of frozen stars, and the sound of a child softly crying in her sleep across the room before I understood something. Grief doesn't keep them alive. Me suffering in silence, that doesn't honor them. It just buries me beside them while I'm still breathing. And Lord knows if they were here, if they were sitting across from me at this very table, they'd say, Anna, live, love, don't you dare waste the time you've been given. So I got up that morning. I tied back my hair. I folded what little I had left, and I zipped the suitcase closed. Then I did something I hadn't done in months. I stood by the door, looked out at the sun rising over unfamiliar rooftops, and whispered, I forgive myself. That was the real moment, you see. Not the plane ride, not the welcome hug at the airport, but that soft, almost silent declaration that I didn't have to carry the weight of everything forever. I could leave some of it behind. Not forget, never that. But release it, let it rest. I chose to live, not as a woman defined by tragedy, but as one who survived it and kept her heart open. You know, when you live long enough, you start to see patterns, not in the stars or tea leaves or nothing fancy like that, but in the hearts of people, in the way we carry our pain or tuck it away in the corners of our smiles, in the way we wait, oh, how we wait, for the right time, for someone to say sorry, for life to finally feel easy. But the truth is, life don't wait for us. And the biggest mistake I ever made was thinking I had more time to start living. Now I sit here in a warm little house in Chicago. I've got grandbabies with accents I don't quite understand and a daughter who hurries too much but kisses me on the forehead every night. I've got a cabinet full of teas, a worn prayer book by my bed, and a porch where I like to sit when the sun dips low and turns the sky gold like the fields back home. And I think not every day, but often enough about the life I left behind. The good, the awful, and all the in-betweens. And do you know what I've come to realize? That heartbreak and joy, they don't live on opposite ends of the world. They sit right next to each other. Some days they even hold hands. And if you try to keep your heart safe from one, you end up missing the other two. I spent years holding my breath, waiting for grief to leave me alone, waiting for the ache to disappear. But grief doesn't leave. It settles in like an old friend who doesn't say much, just sits with you quietly, reminding you that love once lived here. And still, there's beauty in that. I used to think strength meant not crying, not falling apart. But now I know true strength is waking up the next day and choosing to care again. Choosing to make soup, to plant something in the dirt, to laugh when someone tells a bad joke. It's having the courage to say, I'm still here. I still want to feel something. I ain't here to preach. Lord knows I've made my share of mistakes. But if you're listening, if you've made it this far into my rambling, maybe this is the part you were meant to hear. You don't owe your pain your whole life. You don't have to keep sitting in the same old sorrow, waiting for a different ending. Maybe it's time to let go of the weight that's been dragging behind you. Time to forgive yourself. To forgive them, even if they never said sorry. And maybe, just maybe, it's time to stop waiting. For permission. For perfect timing. For someone to come knocking on your door and tell you it's okay to be happy again. 'Cause that knock might never come, sweetheart. You've got to open the door yourself. I chose to live. And it wasn't dramatic or brave or all that pretty. It was small, soft, one decision at a time. But I'll tell you what, it saved me. Well, here we are. You and me. If you've stayed this long, bless your heart, I suppose you were meant to hear the story. Not just mine, no, but one like it. Maybe your own, maybe your mother's, or your grandmother's. Maybe someone you never quite understood, until now. You see, I didn't tell you all this to make you sad. No. Sadness is only one color in the whole quilt of a life. I told you because stories are how we carry each other, how we remember, how we heal. We're all walking around with a suitcase of memories, and sometimes all we need is for someone to sit beside us and say, "Go on, I'm listening." And if no one said that to you lately, let me be the one. Go on, darling. Tell your story. Even if your voice shakes. Even if you're not sure how it ends. Me, these days, I still wake up early. The birds here in Chicago don't sing like they did back home, but I've learned to love their chatter. I make my tea, sit by the window, and watch the world go on, cars passing, children logan, the sun stretching slow across the sky. And sometimes I think, this too is holy. People often ask me now, Anna, how did you survive all that? And I never know quite how to answer. Some days I didn't feel like I had. Some days I just kept moving, like breathing. One breath, then the next. But I suppose the real answer is, I held on to love. Not always with both hands, not always gracefully, but I never let it slip away entirely. Love of family, of my land, of the past. And someday, maybe love's still to come. You know, there's a photo I keep by my bed, a black and white one, faded at the edges. It's of a boy with a book under his arm and dirt on his boots. Mikola. I never saw him again, never heard what became of him. But some nights, when the wind rustles just right through the trees, I close my eyes and I hear him say my name like he used to. Anna. So soft, like he's still nearby. And sometimes, I still wonder, did he think of me? Did he make it out? Did he know I waited, even after I said I wouldn't? Maybe it does. Maybe not in the way we think. Maybe it doesn't return as the person we lost, but as a child's laughter, or a sunrise, or a red scarf in the snow. I don't pretend to have all the answers. I'm just an old woman sitting by the window with a warm cup and a few good years behind me. But I know this much. If you've still got love in your heart, even a flicker, then you've still got everything. So before you close this, before you go on with your day, let me ask you. Yes, you sitting there with your own memories, your own quiet aches. What's the story you haven't told yet? And what would happen if you finally did?